And then from there, Bob Hamp sees Lauren and I was like, hey, Chandler's. Said, what do you think God's doing in Abilene tonight? So I know the answer to that question. Now, he's seeking and saving the lost. He's establishing his kingdom forever. So I just quoted a couple verses about like, no, like specifically, what do you think he's doing? And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. He's like, well, let's go ask him. Okay. So we go into my little office and Bob prays for us. Spirit of the living God, we just ask that you would speak to us tonight, that you would encourage our hearts. We want to make much of Jesus Christ in this city for your fame. We just ask, Spirit, that you would speak to us tonight. And he said, Matt, Lauren, if something comes to your mind, I want you to write it down. And here's where I knew all of this was nonsense. The first thing that popped in my head was the Whataburger on South 27th Street. And so I thought, I'm hungry. The Spirit of God has just confirmed that I needed taquito. And so I wrote in my journal, per Bob Hamp's prompting, Whataburger S 27th. And then I from there saw in my mind, I don't just know how else to explain this. I just had this impression of a man with black pants and a blue shirt on. So I wrote down black pants, blue shirt, and then I saw pigtails. So I wrote down pigtails. And so this confirmed to me that this was nonsense. And so I said basically as much to Bob. And then he was like, well, let's go see if it is. And we got in our car and we drove to the Whataburger on South 27th. Got out of the car, walked into Whataburger on South 27th, and no one that meets that description was in that. There was a lot of people there. Many people don't know this, but Abilene really is a college town, 3 universities and a large Air Force base there. It's a very young town in not even West Texas, but they call themselves West Texas. And so, man, we walk in and he was like, you know what? Why don't we just get something to eat? And so, like I said, I had already felt like the Spirit told me to get a taquito. And so I walked up to the counter and I order food. And then when I get our order, Lauren stayed at the seat. I grabbed our food. And when I turned to walk, I saw what was the man that I thought I saw in my mind. So it freaked me out. And so I sit down next to him. I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's the guy. To which my wife is like, he doesn't have pigtails. I don't know why I use that voice. That's not how my wife sounds, right? She doesn't sound anything like that. I don't know why I do that. I haven't been able to stop in 20 years of preaching, right? She was like, I mean, she's First Baptist Church Longview, man. She's like, what? Like, that man ain't wearing pigtails. I was like, I know he's not, but I'm just telling you, I think this is, man, look, he had it backwards. He had blue pants and a black shirt. And so, man, we just started eating. I'm freaking out a little bit. I don't know how to explain it. I just knew that that's who the Lord had shown me. And then about 5 minutes later, Bob walks him over to me and says, Matt, do you have that piece of paper in your pocket? And so I pulled out that piece of paper and I handed it to him. And he opened it up and he started weeping and sat down with us. And so here was the story, that while he came in and stood behind Bob Hamp in line who hadn't ordered yet, he tapped Bob on the shoulder and said, hey, Bob Hamp, right? Do you remember me? He said, man, about 10, 12 years ago, we were bringing our daughter to you. Bob was a longtime marriage and family counselor. And by the way, you can read this story in Bob's book, or you can hear the testimony of this man I'm talking about, who I think shared this testimony 2 weeks later at Beltway Park. That he said, we brought our daughter to you. Do you remember the little girl? She always was wearing pigtails. And that, man, she has given herself over to the darker side of things. And we have been at the jail all night, Bob. And man, she got busted selling drugs and in possession with a great deal of drugs and some other things. And we're trying to get her out of jail. It's not looking good, but we're just exhausted. So I came here to just get us some dinner. Would you be praying for us? And Bob was like, hold on, come meet a friend of mine. And brought him over to me. And so here's what happened. And I'll shrink the story. We sat down and man, just encouraged his heart and gave him that piece of paper. And then he took his Whataburger and that piece of paper back to the jail, sat down with his daughter, showed his daughter the piece of paper, explained to his daughter what God had just done and that he thought that this was God after her, longing to forgive her and heal her and bring her into the kingdom. And that night in a jail cell in Abilene, Texas, that young woman professed faith in Jesus Christ. Yes. And 2 weeks later, they stood up, dad and daughter, and shared that story. Now, here's what I would tell you. I think cessationists would go, yeah, that happened. It was a miracle. But they would say it's not normative and shouldn't be pursued. And it's just, I just disagree. Now, that is easily the most significant thing that's happened to me, but there have been lesser, just equally as amazing thing. Katie Carley, you can ask Katie this when you pick up your kids in Little Bit. We were praying over here a couple of months ago, and I just saw in my head while we were praying, the sunflower burst out of the ground and turn towards the sun, which isn't supernatural. That's what sunflowers do. Right? And so I said to Katie, I was like, hey, forgive me. When we were praying for you, I saw the sunflower burst out of the ground and turn towards the sun. And she was like, thanks. And so I was like, oh, okay, we're going to have to probably look for a new associate. She's out. She's like, you're crazy. I'm leaving. And then she came downstairs later that day and she brought me a note. I thought about scanning the note in and put it on the screen, but like I said, I just keep this sermon won't end. And so she had on one side of the letter just probably 10 or 11 pictures of sunflowers with her family. And then she wrote me a note on the other side that said that the sunflower had been a crest in their family, and that they plant sunflowers every year in their backyard, and they've taught their daughters about what it means to follow Jesus Christ by watching the sunflower come and turn and find the sun. And she said, I felt so personally loved and touched by God. Thank you.